Franny Norton has rejoined Lee Mottershead and I, and we are going to start with UK's racing's governance structure. And Lee, you've been obviously doing quite an in-depth amount of research on this. What is the overall, the overriding problem at the moment?
So, 2 special reports in the Post in the last few days on the governance structure, which is about 2 years old now. In effect, the BHA board should now be the sport's ultimate decision-making body. It's fed into by 3 committees, including a commercial committee, which, as its name suggests, should be responsible for the commercial aspects of the sport. The problem with the old governance structure, built around the tripartite system, was that nothing ever got done, because the stakeholders, in effect participants and racecourses, who were also shareholders in the BHA, had a power of veto, which meant the BHA couldn't ever really make any big decisions. In theory, that shouldn't be the case now. There are 5 independents on the BHA board, including Joe Smith, the chair, 4 member-nominated representatives. But it's still the case that things aren't happening. We had, when the new governance system came in 2 years ago, the big thrust was that this would help us to create an industry strategy. BHA Chief Executive Julie Harrington says in the pieces there isn't as yet an industry strategy. You look at the way Premier Racing was launched, Premier Race Days, that has been widely derided. Nevin Truesdale, the Jockey Club Chief Executive, is inside the room. He's a member of the commercial committee. He explained in the pieces that it's still the case that we only get incremental change, we only have baby steps, and there is too much of people looking out for their own interests. And that is the thrust of the argument, Rishi, that British racing is still cursed by the power of vested interests, by organisations, constituencies, looking at their own short-term goals, their own short-term profit and loss, what's in their interest here and now, not what is in the wider long-term interest of British racing. And things will only change if there's either structural change or behavioural change from the people within the structure.
Will it ever change? That's the question. We will talk more about that, of course, in the future, no doubt. Yeah. Big story earlier this year, JeanClaude Rouge and Jérôme Renier were about to join forces amid grand fanfare, but that has all fizzled out.
Yeah, so JeanClaude Rouge, record-breaking French trainer, won the Arc last year, a training colossus in France. It was announced during the summer that he would be joining forces with one of the rising stars of the French training ranks, Jérôme Renier, and that they would be in effect pooling their stables into one massive operation with posts all across France. There've been rumours for a few weeks that that now wasn't going to happen. Lawyers for the 2 trainers said, no, we're still looking at it. They've stopped looking at it. Jérôme Renier was the one who did most of the talking this week. JeanClaude Rouge has only been seen on a racecourse once in recent months. He's been having various health problems. Jérôme Renier explained that whilst there had still been an ambition in principle to bring the 2 stables together, in practice, some of the rules regarding employment in France, in terms of how you run a business, meant that it wouldn't have been a practical solution for them to join forces. Now, in some ways, that was an odd thing to hear, because one would have imagined that those conversations, those discussions, those explorations would have taken place before the announcement of a joining of forces. But since then, there'd also been indications that some owners within these 2 operations weren't necessarily overjoyed about the idea, may have been completely unconnected, but the Aga Khan announced that his horses would be leaving the Rouge stable and heading to Francis Graffard's yard. I think in general terms, for French racing, for a lot of trainers in French racing, they will be pleased at this news. Had there been a type, it would have created a mega operation, and that potentially might not have been great for French racing as a whole.
Certainly feels like it's a challenging time for JeanClaude Rouge, perhaps more than Jérôme Renier, who in fact is about to go on his travels with a few of his horses.
Yeah, Lazat to Australia.
Speaking of committees and governance structure, a former chair of the BHB, Peter Saval, part of this pressure group he's a spokesperson for, involving 150 trainers. They're going to kite mark racecourses that deliver financially, but they're going to avoid entering horses at racecourses that don't, starting from next year. What's the latest on that?
That's what he's saying. So Peter, who, as you say, Rishi, has been ingrained in British racing politics for a long time, announced during the week that they'd had more constructive talks with racecourses. A few more had signed up to this kite mark proposal, which is built around racecourses committing to put in 33% of their racing income into prize money. Peter also said in this Racing Post article by Bill Barber that he had met resistance from some racecourses who hadn't engaged with the Professional Racing Association, and that the RCA, the trade association, had told some racecourses not to engage with the Professional Racing Association. In some ways, I'm not necessarily surprised, Rishi, because one of the problems with British racing politics, British racing governance, is divisions, not just between sectors, but within sectors. And you have a situation here where the PRA, ostensibly a pressure group that describes itself as representing trainers as agents, is doing the same work that the Thoroughbred Group, the representative body for owners, trainers, jockeys, breeders and stable staff, is also doing. I find it perplexing that the PRA says it has exclusive rights to negotiate on behalf of its members, when those members, those trainers, presumably are also members of the Thoroughbred Group and the National Trainers Federation, which are representative bodies. I also find it confusing that the PRA is doing these negotiations on behalf of trainers, when surely it's owners, the people who employ trainers and actually race for most of the prize money, who should be represented primarily in negotiations such as this. So it's muddy waters. I think you're going to have interesting discussions between the Thoroughbred Group and the PRA. Saval's not a man to lie down, but on this one, I think the more obvious people to be having those negotiations are those within the Thoroughbred Group.
Feels we're going to get to a point where butting heads will be happening very soon.
Does sometimes happen in racing.
Jack Berry making it to the Hall of Fame. Franny, not obviously just for the fact that he was a great trainer, but for the incredible work he has done for racing charity, raising money.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I go back a long way with Jack and rode for his son as well. But it's what it took 40-odd years before they've recognised this, haven't they? And listen, it's long overdue, but it's here now, and he's got what he deserves, and an incredible man.
Yeah, we all remember Jack as a terrific trainer of sprinters. You know, growing up, you remember watching all the mind games, etc., the Selhurst Park Flyers winning the big handicaps, etc. But the work he has done since he retired has been almost as if he doesn't ever tire.
He's extraordinary. I had a fantastic day, Rishi, a couple of months ago when I went to Jack for a Racing Post interview. He's 86 years old. He is completely tireless. As you say, he's got a tremendous record as a trainer, but what he has done contributing to the sport, giving to sport is colossal. He was instrumental, integral in creating the Injured Jockeys Fund, which completely transformed the lives of jockeys. He was instrumental in creating the IGF's holiday for beneficiaries, which I had a huge honour to join this year and look at what it does. He continues, even in private matters, to help jockeys past and present in their lives. He's done a lot of work with Graham Lee since his injury, and he's doing all that now while himself undergoing treatment for cancer, which hasn't in any way seemingly slowed him down. He is an extraordinary man. I remember John Frankham, when he was giving a speech in the Spanish holiday, which Jack couldn't attend this year because of his treatment, he was saying something along the lines of, if you had to name some of the 3 best people you've ever met, Jack would be number 1.
It seems like entry into the Hall of Fame doesn't even do what he does justice.
No, and to be fair, the Hall of Fame is a relatively recent thing.
Yes.
It hasn't actually taken him long to get in it because he's so great.
Auguste Rodin is going to have one more run. He's going to the Japan Cup and then he will retire to Coolmore. Auguste Rodin, is the Japan Cup the right swan song for him?
Well, I think it's the obvious one, given his breeding as a son of Deep Impact, who is revered in Japanese racing circles. If he could go and win a Japan Cup, then I think commercially, as well as his legacy, it would be an amazing thing for Auguste Rodin. No surprise that they've announced his retirement. He's funny, he's one of these horses that we've had so much debate about, more so than almost any other horse at the top level, because there's always been that case of, is he just wildly inconsistent, or is there an excuse every time for him? And I remember there was probably a 10-minute debrief between Aidan and the media at Goodwood, following Kypros's Goodwood Cup, but the talk was all about what Auguste Rodin had done or not done in the King George a few days earlier when he'd been beaten again, and Aidan was explaining what had gone wrong that day. What we saw at Leopardstown last time in the Irish Champion Stakes is probably the real Auguste Rodin. He's a very, very good horse, not an all-time great, but a very, very good horse, and he's a horse who, if he wins the Japan Cup, we'll all be delighted.
Do you think he's a very, very good horse, Franny, Auguste Rodin?
Very tough, wasn't he? Very tough, but as Lee's mentioned there, you know, like, he did have his little ups and downs, didn't he? But
are we too harsh on horses because they're so fragile?
Probably.
And would you say, Rishi, I've never yet met a horse who was offended by people being critical of their performances. I think debate about the merits of horses is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's possible, though, that this year Aidan O'Brien could win the Japan Cup and the Breeders' Cup Classic with Derby winners, which would be quite something for the race that I love, which is the Derby at Epsom.
We all
love to see that.
We all love it.
One more talking point, and it involves something that's caused quite a bit of consternation amongst the jockeys, particularly those in the north, Franny. There was a meeting at Fosslas that was abandoned. They've rescheduled, the BHA have rescheduled that meeting now for Saval on a Sunday. That was originally going to be a day of rest for quite a few of the jockeys up north in particular. And they are annoyed and irritated that they weren't consulted by this. As someone who's ridden for so long, based in the north, what's your reaction when you hear that?
I think it's poor communication. Obviously, the boys have been tirelessly working away. They'll want to go out with the family or whatever they want to do. But I think more importantly is the communication between it, and for not telling them was just poor.
Why? I mean, it's 2024. Communicating shouldn't be that hard, should it?
Well, you go and tell them up there. You go and see the powers to be. But for me, it was just poor communication. The boys have probably got themselves organised and wanting a rest. But, you know, like if an opportunity comes, then they have to take him, otherwise somebody else will take it. And if you don't kick that ball, there's someone behind you that'll kick it for you, so...
That's the heart of it, isn't it? Because whenever this sort of situation arises, you will hear people saying, well, jockeys are all, in effect, self-employed workers. They don't have to ride on a certain day. But, Franny, it's not as simple as that, is it?
It's not as simple as that. It's not as simple because, you know... Whatever runs on Sunday, if you don't go, somebody gets on it and then they win on it, they keep the ride on it or, you know, whatever. So you're going to miss out on that. And you just don't want to get off that hamster wheel. You've got to stay on. And as I said, if you don't kick that ball, someone behind you will kick it. So it's a bit unfair, I think.
I suppose in a wider sense, if you're trying to play devil's advocate, I suppose you'd also say that on the BHA side of it, is that they would argue that there is a pool of horses that are waiting to race. This gives those owners an opportunity, and it also gives an opportunity to trainers and jockeys who do want to take part on race on this day. It's a complicated one, isn't it?
Lee, Franny, thank you for the moment. That has been this week's Talking Points. Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.